at his pro day, he had a 6.55 3-cone, which is an unbelievable number. And obviously, pro day times can be maybe a little bit skewed, but I mean, that's something I pride the beast about is all these numbers are NFL verified. They're coming straight from scouts, no agents, no players, not what I'm seeing on Twitter. 100% of the testing numbers in the beast are coming straight from NFL teams. And so I tend to believe that 6.55.
On today's episode, we're talking about NFL draft sleepers. I'm Warren Sharp. This is Sharp Football Analysis. And today I have the privilege of welcoming Dane Brugler of The Athletic and author of The Beast, the premier NFL draft guide. We're going to talk to him about a lot of his great work throughout a 3-part series. Today, let's hit draft sleepers. Let's get into it. Welcome in, Dane. You are one of the hardest working guys in the industry. This is a 600-page draft guide that you drop a couple weeks before the NFL draft. I know it takes a year for you to complete, and I'm sure it feels great once you're done with it. How does it feel getting it into the hands of the public, seeing some of the reaction, and then going on this whirlwind media tour where you get to talk to everybody about, what we might see happening next week on Thursday night?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes out, it's equal parts excitement and just a lot of anxiety because obviously you work on something for a year. I mean, Warren, you pour so much into one publication, and then to just release it into the public, you kind of, hope you got your T's crossed, your I's dotted, everything. But so far, the feedback has been awesome, and it's very rewarding in that respect. So thankfully, people, if you haven't checked it out, go to The Athletic. The digital version's awesome. We have a lot of smart, talented people behind the scenes that have turned my basic PDF into this great looking digital site with the artwork and the navigation and all of that. So it's pretty cool to see how far we've taken this thing. We try to set the bar high every year, and then we'll worry about trying to cross that bar next year.
Yeah, no, the next year is always like, okay, at least I don't have to worry about figuring out how to make this better for another 365 days. But right. I know the feeling, and I cannot encourage everybody enough. Echo Dane's sentiments entirely. Go check out the guide over at The Athletic. I haven't downloaded the PDF. Fortunately, I'm in front of my computer basically, 20 hours a day, it feels like. So I'm just diving into the online version, and it's very functional. I love the different menu options. I love the ability to just jump to position by position. And when you click into a player, there's just so much outstanding insight about him, about his background, about the pronunciation of these guys, about their families, like everything you would need is about, if you want to talk about these guys to some of your friends and buddies and sound smart. But in addition to that, like where Dane actually thinks that these guys are going to go. And that's where we'll get into here as it relates to some of the sleepers. We're going to be talking about players that you think, Dane, are going to outplay their draft position. And that's the definition we're going to use for sleeper. And as a result of that, we're going to be able to talk about some of these guys in the first round, in addition to day 2 and day 3 sleepers, because I know a lot of the listeners out there, the fans of the show, while you know a lot about the running back in the top 60 from Colorado Mesa, these guys are trying to figure out who does Dane think might sneak into that first round, and they still might view that player as a sleeper to slip into that first round on Thursday night next week. So let's start small in that thought process. Who are the guys that you think have a chance that aren't currently maybe being projected by many to go in the first round, but you think might have a shot based upon either your evaluation that you included in the Beast or some of the things that you've heard and talked to people about since you published it about a week ago?
Yeah, so my guy for the longest time was Chris Johnson, the corner from San Diego State. I think a lot of people have caught up to him in terms of realizing, okay, where are the holes in his game? Just in terms, he's smooth, he's 6 foot, he's smart, he's instinctive, the ball skills. So I think most people have caught up to that. But if they haven't yet, I think Chris Johnson is the first name I want to mention, just because he's probably my favorite player in the draft, and somebody that I've been high on since September. I think it's interesting with this guard class. Venga Ioane will be a first round pick. We know that. But talking to teams, they think a second guard is going to get in there. Now, maybe that's Keelan Rutledge from Georgia Tech. There's some love for Jennings Dunker out of Iowa. I think it'll be Chase Bisontis from Texas A&M, who, based off of, he was one of 6 players, the 319 players invited to the combine. Bisontis was one of 6 that actually did everything. So, okay, I like the competitor right away. But you watch the tape and you see a guy that's an efficient mover, strong as heck. Wish he was a little bit longer, but especially after his workout, there's a buzz about him with teams. And so I think once really, and the thing is the picks between 20 and 48 the grades are gonna be so similar for teams. So once we get to the playoff teams, the last 12 picks of the first round, people need to keep an open mind about some of the names we could hear in that range based off of what you've seen in mock drafts and then based on what actually happens. Because again, those grades are so similar with teams that if Chase Bisontis goes to the Chargers at 22, then maybe people will raise their eyebrows like, oh wow, we didn't see him going that high. But we know the Chargers need a guard, and it's really not that much of it wouldn't be a reach by any means. I think he's right there in that mix to be kind of a late first round pick. I think just like, talking about that second guard, kind of the same thing with that second linebacker. We know Sonny Styles is going to be a top 10 pick. That's happening. Is there a second linebacker that gets into the first round? Some teams think that will happen. Now, which one will it be? Will it be Jacob Rodriguez from Texas Tech or C.J. Allen from Georgia? I think that's the debate between those two players. Who will be that linebacker 2 off the board? Rodriguez just had an unbelievable 2025 season at Texas Tech and then crushed the draft process. For me, seeing him up close, 10 feet away at on the sidelines at the Senior Bowl, gave me a new appreciation for his athleticism, the way he moves, and just the way the ball finds him. Like it's at a certain point, you have to stop saying it's a coincidence. And so I think for me, that's why Rodriguez is my linebacker 2, and why I won't be surprised at all if he ends up in the second round, especially based off of how teams talk about him and really appreciate his game. But there is some love for C.J. Allen as well as one of those guys that might sneak into the first. If you squint, you can see Roquan Smith. Just the way he moves, his ability to key and diagnose and get to the ball quickly. Ran a 40 this week for teams, actually for one team, and then that team kind of distributed the numbers, but it was in the high 4.4s, like 4.47, that type of range. So that linebacker 2 is something that I know teams are kind of looking at. And then one more, a guy that's been one of the more popular players during this pre-draft process, Treydan Stukes, the nickel from Arizona. I think had 11 visits so far. He was in Pittsburgh yesterday, KC the day before that, Seattle on Monday. So it's scouts like him, but I think once coaches got their hands on him during the process, that's where it just started that ascension, because he was well liked, but now we're talking about him as a top 40 pick. Could go somewhere in the 30s, anywhere in the 30s, and it wouldn't be surprising. So I think once the coaches got a chance to sit down with him, learn more about him, and he's an older player, and so that's not ideal. But the glass half full part of that is you're getting a guy with a lot of experience who has played outside nickel, played safety, played just a lot of these positions. So he has a good understanding of how the mental part of it, the processing, and how that's going to work at the next level.
Fascinating. So I'm looking at Bisontis. He's at plus 165 right now to go in the first round. So you get some value if you're looking at that one. And I see, Dane, you also, not only did you drop the beast last week, then you came back at the beginning of this week. I think you dropped your mock draft, your full mock draft. So make sure you guys go check that out over at The Athletic. And you do have Bisontis going currently 28 to the Houston Texans in that mock. Rutledge is plus 275. So you've got a couple of those interior offensive linemen sneaking into the first round. You don't have Rutledge going in yours, but if you were to, plus 275. And then C.J. Allen, you just mentioned him. He's plus 115. And Stukes, they don't currently have a line at where I'm looking. So there's some values in some of those players, as you mentioned, potentially sneaking into the first round if you guys want to pay attention to some of the sports betting markets as well. Now, Let's go a little bit deeper, Dane. I know you evaluated a ton of prospects over the last 365 days. Are there any guys on day two? I'll just wide open here, day 2 or 3, that you think are potential sleepers that people should keep their eyes out for? Maybe not so much on the sports betting market, but just guys that you think are good players. Not enough people are talking about them. You think their careers are going to maybe outperform where they're actually selected in the draft, and you really grew attracted to them during the evaluation process.
He's becoming less and less of a sleeper by the day, it feels like, because he's going on so many visits. And talking to him, there's actually some visits he had to turn down because there's not enough time. That's Dejon Stribling, the wide receiver from Ole Miss. We're going to see what, 5, maybe 6 receivers go in the first round, and then there's a good chance we see another 5 in round 2. And Stribling, I think, has a good chance to be one of those guys. 6'2", 207 pounds, ran the 4.36 at the combine. I think that was kind of the first, like, people that didn't know who Stribling was, that's something that, get your ears perked up when you hear that. But watching him during the college football playoffs for Ole Miss, that's what I think, because I liked him even coming into the year. Stribling was a guy that started out at Washington State, then went to Oklahoma State. Then he transferred to Ole Miss this year, came into the 2025 season with, say like a 4th round grade, somewhere around there. And then, but then you watch him throughout the year with Ole Miss, and then through the playoffs, and you're like, okay, this looks like a guy that could become a starter. And that just continued through the pre-draft process. And so, like I said, I think he's becoming less and less of a sleeper as we get closer to draft night. But I still wanted to bring him up because he's a name that gets brought up quite a bit, just talking with league guys. So Stribling would qualify. If we want to go with a running back, I really like Keyshawn Black from Indiana. Eli Heidenreich, the Navy running back, who we're going to call him a running back, but really he's kind of like a do everything slot receiver, more like a Danny Woodhead type of player. We think of that Navy option offense, and we don't necessarily think of a pass catcher, but Heidenreich, he was the most prolific pass catcher to come through that Navy program, set a ton of records, very good ball skills, doesn't have a huge catch radius, but he makes it happen. And just a guy that whether you're going to use him in kind of the screen game, you want to use him on wheels, you want to use him down the seam, he can just do a lot of things for you. So Eli Heidenreich, and he also did a really nice job throughout the process in terms of the testing at the combine. So he was a 4.44 guy in the 40-yard dash, and then at his pro day he had a 6.55 3-cone, which is an unbelievable number. And obviously pro day times can be maybe a little bit skewed, but I mean, that's something I pride the beast about, is all these numbers are NFL verified. They're coming straight from scouts, no agents, no players, not what I'm seeing on Twitter. 100% of the testing numbers in the beast are coming straight from NFL teams. And so I tend to believe that 6.55.
Outstanding. So we got a couple of later round sleepers. I've definitely heard a lot about Stribling here. Not much on the betting markets for him, but definitely a lot of murmurs and buzz around Stribling. And then Heidenreich, I definitely remember watching him at Navy and his contributions to that program. So could be a guy to look out for, and kind of Mr. Do-It-All, as you said, if your team does end up drafting him, a guy who can help out a lot for your team in the NFL. So we covered a few different sleepers. As a reminder, this is episode 1 in a 3-part series here with Dane Brugler. Make sure you check out his beast, but make sure you also subscribe to us over on YouTube so that you can check out parts 2 and 3, where we're going to be talking about some rumors as well as some of Dane's top prospects. Stay tuned. We'll be back soon.